Hello everyone, and welcome back to Crime Whisper. I'm here to help you wind down for the night. So before we begin, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it where you are right now? Get cozy, settle in, and let the story carry you gently to sleep. Case 1, Spain on April 7th, 2021. 29-year-old Helen Arias left her home in the city of Oviedo, in northern Spain, and vanished without a trace. She was heading to a quiet rural town in Leon province, a place she'd visited before. That's where her former partner's family lived. The trip seemed ordinary. She told her mother she'd return the same day. No signs of stress, no unusual tone in her voice. But by evening, Helen stopped replying to messages. Her phone, once active, went completely silent. Later, her car was found still parked, with all her personal belongings inside, but Helen was gone. What started as a missing person report quickly spiraled into a high-profile investigation. Conflicting stories, witnesses who refused to speak, and a trail of unsettling clues that only deepened the mystery. No one could have imagined just how dark things would become. Helen was born in 1992 in Oviedo, a quiet city in the autonomous community of Est. She was an only child, raised in a modest, middle-class home. Her parents worked regular jobs and gave her a steady, nurturing upbringing. Their household was calm. Arguments were rare. Even as a child, Helen stood out. She was thoughtful, independent, and remarkably organized. She rarely needed supervision and always followed through on her commitments. In school, she was a good student, not flashy, just consistent. Outside of the classroom, she preferred solitude over crowds. She found comfort in quiet routines and close family time rather than large social circles. After high school, she enrolled at the University of Oviedo, choosing a path in social work and psychology. Her goal, to help people navigate life's most difficult challenges. She stayed under the radar during college, never one for protests or parties. Those who knew her described her as reserved but kind, a slow, steady thinker, someone who avoided chaos and made careful decisions. It was in 2018 that Helen met José Ángel Bobadilla. He was a few years older, already working, and they connected through mutual friends. At first, everything seemed ideal. Jose was respectful, attentive, and kept appropriate boundaries, exactly the kind of stability Helen valued. A few months in, he introduced her to his family in Prau de Espina, a small town in Leon. Helen met his parents and his younger sister, Andrea. The visit was uneventful. His family was polite, a little formal, but nothing out of the ordinary. Andrea, being younger, seemed especially curious and friendly. From then on, Helen became part of their routine. She visited often, growing closer to Jose and his family. Despite Jose's inconsistent job situation and a mounting debt of over Euro 13,000, Helen didn't see it as a red flag. She considered it his personal burdens, something he would handle in time. But by 2020, things began to shift. Jose grew distant. Their once smooth conversations became tense. He began referring vaguely to personal struggles without ever fully explaining them. The debts still unresolved seemed to weigh on him more heavily, but he avoided details, never revealing who was pressuring him or how he planned to pay it back. His behavior became erratic. Long silences, missed calls, irritability, a growing sense of emotional distance. Andrea, once friendly, became cooler. Her warmth toward Helen faded. Conversations grew stiff and formal, though she never directly criticized her brother or Helen. It was more about what wasn't said. By early 2021, Jose started hinting that creditors were demanding repayment urgently. He floated the idea of selling his car, technically his, but previously shared with Helen. She didn't argue, but the suggestion made it clear things were unraveling. The relationship had become cold and formal. Their contact dwindled to occasional messages. Plans for the future disappeared, and though Jose never officially ended things, emotionally, he had already pulled away. Helen didn't chase him. She believed if the relationship were to continue, it had to be his choice to fix it, but he never did. Then came April 7th, 2021. Around 9 a.m., Helen left her home in Oviedo. She told her mother she was heading to Pro de Espina, where Jose lived. It wasn't an unusual trip. She planned to return that same day. Nothing seemed wrong. No tension in her voice. Just a casual visit, she said. Her phone remained active until around 1 p.m. After that. Silence. No more messages. No replies. No calls returned. At first, her mother thought maybe she'd been delayed, but by evening 8 p.m. concern turned to fear. Helen had never stayed out of contact this long, and her phone was now off. When her car was found and touched, with all her belongings still inside, it became clear something had gone terribly wrong. Soft ambient music begins to fade in, and that is where we'll pause the story for tonight. In the next episode, we'll explore the investigation, the missing hours, and the chilling revelations that followed. Thank you for spending this quiet moment with me. If you're still awake, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Crime Whisper. Sleep well, and remember, not all mysteries stay buried forever. So breathe deep, close your eyes, and let's return to the case. Though Helen had always kept her family updated about any changes to her plans, her silence that evening was deeply out of character. By 10 p.m., concern turned into outright panic. Her mother began calling Jose, the man Helen said she was going to visit. Jose's response was unsettling. He claimed he hadn't seen Helen that day, that she hadn't messaged him. His tone was flat, his reaction disturbingly calm. He didn't offer to help, didn't drive to Oviedo, and made no attempt to search for her. His passivity raised immediate red flags. The next morning, Helen's family went to the police and filed an official missing person report. Authorities immediately began reviewing her last known movements. One of their first steps was tracing her phone. The data confirmed what the family already feared. Helen had indeed arrived in Pro de Espina. Her phone had last pinged near the area just after midday. Then, nothing. The signal went dark. Police began canvassing the area and speaking with locals. One resident reported seeing a woman who resembled Helen near the outskirts of town earlier that day, but no one could confirm her identity. There were very few security cameras in the area. None captured her movements. There was also no footage of her arriving at the Bobadilla residence, where Jose and his family lived. Both Jose and Andrea, his sister, told police the same thing. Helen never showed up, but her phone's geolocation told a different story. That contradiction only deepened the mystery and suspicion. Investigators quickly shifted their focus to Helen's relationship with Jose and his family. Meanwhile, Helen's loved ones took to social media, sharing her photo and appealing for help. The posts began circulating widely. Within 24 hours, police had found Helen's car abandoned near a train station in a nearby town. The car was locked. There was no visible damage. Inside were all her belongings, her handbag ID, and personal items except for her phone. There were no signs of a struggle inside the vehicle. Everything appeared neat, undisturbed. That, in itself, was troubling. If Helen had left willingly, why leave behind everything? The theory of a voluntary disappearance was quickly ruled out. Helen had no history of mental health struggles, impulsive decisions, or self-destructive behavior. As concerns escalated, police expanded their search. They brought in dogs, drones, and volunteers from the community. Local news picked up the story. The case began to receive wider attention, but the first 48 hours yielded no major breakthroughs. Helen's phone remained off. Jose and his sister, Andrea, continued to insist they hadn't seen her. Neither offered to help search. Neither expressed public concern. By the end of the second day, the case was officially reclassified, not just a disappearance, but a potential criminal act. A specialized investigative unit took over. The working theory shifted. This wasn't an accident. It was likely foul play. Then, on April 11th, 2021, 4 days after, Helen was last seen, civilian volunteers searching the outskirts of Pro de Espina made a discovery. They noticed broken branches, disturbed vegetation, and subtle markings leading toward a ravine at the bottom. Hidden under thick brush and debris was a body. The area was immediately sealed off. Helen was found lying on her back. Her wrists were bound with plastic zip ties. Marks around her neck suggested she had been strangled. A head injury pointed to blunt force trauma. Her face showed bruising and damage. There were no signs of a struggle at the dump site itself, but drag marks on the ground indicated she had been moved post-mortem. Nearby, police recovered more evidence: cut zip ties, a torn cloth bag, tire track sand, strands of hair knot. Helen's forensics confirmed the cause of death: asphyxiation. The head injury likely caused unconsciousness, but didn't kill her. She died within 1 to 2 hours of her last phone activity. The timeline matched what they already suspected. She had died shortly after arriving in town. Her body showed no signs of long-term exposure to the elements. Whoever had done this had moved quickly. The concealment was rushed, using branches, leaves, and dirt, whatever was nearby. That same day, police launched a targeted response. The first people taken into custody were Andrea Bobadilla and her former partner Roel. Under questioning, Andrea broke. She admitted to helping dispose of Helen's body and identified Jose as the killer. According to her statement, the confrontation between Jose and Helen happened inside their family home. Soon after, Jose Bobadilla was arrested. He offered no resistance. During initial interrogations, Jose denied everything. He insisted Helen never came to see him that day, but that claim collapsed, quickly disproven by Andrea's confession and Helen's phone data. Back at the Bobadilla residence, investigators found blood in a utility room. Forensic testing confirmed the blood belonged to Helen. They also found packaging from the same type of zip ties used at the scene, and fabric scraps identical to those found with her body. Step by step, investigators were able to reconstruct what had happened. Helen arrived in town. She went to see Jose. At some point, they argued. Jose struck her hard enough to knock her unconscious. He then strangled her, ending her life. Later that evening, Jose, Andrea, and Raul moved her body to a remote ravine under cover of night. There were no witnesses, but there was now overwhelming evidence. Within 48 hours, police had enough to file formal charges. All three were placed in custody. The case was officially classified as a criminal act involving premeditation, cover-up, and evidence tampering. Raul refused to testify. He neither confirmed Andrea's account nor provided his own version. His lawyer claimed he had joined the drive without knowing what it was for, but investigators didn't buy it. They argued that Raul knew exactly what had happened. Hunt helped hide it. He never contacted police. He actively helped destroy evidence. At his third interrogation, Jose finally cracked partially. He admitted to what had occurred, but claimed he had acted in a moment of emotional overwhelm. But police and prosecutors were not convinced. Nothing about his actions showed panic. There were no calls for help, no report of an accident, only a calculated effort to erase what had happened. In the end, Andrea and Raul were identified as accomplices. Both had opportunities to walk away. Both chose to help. The body of evidence was vast. DNA matches, blood traces, text message records, Andrea's confession, and forensic timelines. Together, they painted a tragic but clear picture. Helen Arias had trusted someone who did not deserve that trust. She had gone to visit the man she once loved and never came home. Soft ambient music fades in again. That brings us to the end of this chapter. Helen's story reminds us that even the most cautious, thoughtful people can be caught off guard by those they believe they know. She lived a quiet life, a life built on care, honesty, and stability, and yet, her end was shaped by deception and silence. Thank you for listening to Crime Whisper. If you're still awake, be kind to yourself, breathe deeply, and remember, sometimes, justice comes in whispers too. Following the recovery of Helen's body, investigators found matching evidence at both the burial site and the Bobadilla family home. Items like zip ties, bloodstains, and torn fabric linked the two locations. By the end of the investigation, prosecutors filed multiple charges: unlawful killing, complicity, concealing a body, providing false statements. 3 suspects, Jose Bobadilla, his sister Andrea, and her former partner Roel, were held in custody awaiting trial. The trial began in early 2022. Prosecutors painted the case as a coordinated and deliberate act, followed by a calculated effort to hide the crime. In court, Jose partially admitted to his role. He acknowledged there had been an argument and a physical altercation, but denied he had any intent to kill. His defense claimed he was emotionally overwhelmed, provoked, and never meant for things to go that far. The court rejected that narrative. Witness testimony, forensic evidence, and Jose's behavior afterward, especially his failure to seek help or report the incident, pointed to deliberate, intentional actions. Andrea stuck to her initial confession. She described Jose as the primary perpetrator and admitted that both she and Errol had helped conceal the body. Her defense team asked the court to consider the pressure she had been under from her brother and emphasized that she hadn't taken part in the violence itself. Raul, however, remained silent throughout the proceedings. His lawyer argued that he hadn't known what he was involved in and lacked full awareness of the crime. Still, prosecutors pointed out that Raul did not report the incident, actively helped transport the body, and destroyed evidence. In the end, the court delivered its verdict. Jose Bobadilla was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Andrea received 8 years for her role in the cover-up. Role was given 6 years for aiding and abetting. Helen's family was present throughout the trial. Her mother, acting as a private complainant, pushed for the maximum penalties. After the sentencing, she expressed disappointment, calling Andrea and Raul's punishments too lenient. Jose's family chose not to comment. Months later, Jose's legal team filed an appeal. They claimed key evidence from the first trial should have been excluded, specifically Andrea's confession, which they argued was made under pressure. They also questioned whether the forensic procedures met legal standards and claimed the items found at the house didn't conclusively prove Jose had committed the act. The appellate court agreed to review the case in the second trial, held in 2023. Prosecutors stuck to their original theory that Jose had deliberately killed Helen, hidden her body, and lied to authorities. But this time, the defense shifted strategy. They pointed out that the head injury Helen suffered wasn't fatal, and argued that the cause of death, strangulation, could not be conclusively proven. They emphasized the lack of a clear motive, and suggested the initial trial was influenced by public pressure and media coverage. More critically, Andrea retracted parts of her original statement, saying she had spoken while under emotional distress. Raul, too, changed his stance and refused to confirm earlier details. With major elements of the prosecution's case weakened, the court ruled that some evidence was inadmissible, and with no direct proof that Jose had physically harmed Helen or that the asphyxiation was intentional, the judges ruled that there was not enough evidence to uphold a conviction. In a shocking decision, Jose Bobadilla was acquitted and released from custody. The ruling sparked outrage. Helen's mother publicly denounced the decision, calling it a betrayal of justice. She accused the court of failing victims and weakening trust in the system. Prosecutors attempted to appeal the acquittal, but the higher court declined to reopen the case. Public response was swift and emotional. For weeks, social media was filled with commentary. Many viewed the acquittal as a miscarriage of justice, while others pointed to the lack of solid forensic evidence as justification. Debates over due process, victim rights, and the handling of the case consumed the public sphere. Meanwhile, Andrea and Roll quietly continued serving their sentences. The Bobadilla family made no further public statements. To this day, key questions remain unanswered. Why did Jose do what he did? What truly happened in that house? What could have prevented it? In both trials, Jose never offered a full explanation. Investigators believe the incident stemmed from a mix of unresolved financial pressure, emotional instability, and a collapsing relationship. But the truth, like Helen herself, was buried far too soon. Soft music fades out. A brief pause engagement really makes a difference. If you're still with me, take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below. And now, we turn the page to Case 2. Even in the most loving, tight-knit families, conflict can brew quietly beneath the surface. Misunderstandings, hurt, resentment, all of it can simmer for years without ever exploding. But when it finally does, the outcome can be devastating. The story of Anja Lama Mehet is as disturbing as it is tragic. A case filled with family honor, secrets, and a desperate effort to bury the truth literally and figuratively. Anja Lama was born on August 26, 1995, in the small industrial town of Hettada, located in southern central Nepal. She was the eldest child in a large family that struggled financially. From a young age, she took on the role of caregiver, raising her younger siblings, helping her mother with chores, and managing household responsibilities. Anja was mature beyond her years, kind, helpful, smart. She had a quiet charm that drew people to her. Her teachers praised her for her intelligence and focus. Her neighbors admired her grace. Despite their modest background, Anja's family believed she was destined for great things. She had big dreams, sought beauty, fashion. She wanted to work with her hands, to create, to design, but her dreams would have to be built from the ground up. There were no shortcuts, no wealthy uncles, no safety nets. While still in school, Anja met Promahita, young man a year older than her. He came from a wealthy, high-status family. His parents, Pushpa and Kimal Bahadra, were respected pillars of the community. His older brother, Udo, was a well-known music producer. From the beginning, Anja and Prawl felt a connection. They shared dreams, ideas, humor, and emotional bond that grew quickly, but they kept their relationship private. Why? Because of their vastly different social backgrounds. Anja came from the Tamang ethnic group, historically marginalized and of Mongolian descent. Prawl's family came from privilege and tradition. Still, their love deepened, and eventually, they made a promise to stay together, no matter what, even if it meant going against their families, their culture, and their future. Pause. Music fades up, and that's where we'll leave it tonight. Next time on Crime Whisper, we'll dive into what happened behind the walls of the Mehet family home, a place that seemed perfect from the outside, but held dangerous secrets within. Until then, sleep well, stay safe, and remember, truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. When Anja and Pral's relationship became public, it triggered immediate backlash from both families. The Mehets, proud and traditional, were especially resistant. They saw the match as a social mismatch and acceptable in their eyes. But one person stood by them, Udrell, Pral's older brother. Moved by the couple's deep bond, Udrell offered his support. Quietly, he helped them plan a small, private wedding. He even covered all the expenses from his own savings. His intentions were noble, but the moment the marriage became public, it set off a family scandal. Still, the couple moved forward. They were married in late 2016. Anja was 21. Pral had just turned 2. In the early months of their marriage, life was anything but easy. With no steady jobs or reliable income, they moved between cheap rental apartments, surviving mostly on financial help. Prahl worked hard to find stable employment, but all he could land were short-term, low-paying jobs. Despite the struggle, they remained hopeful. Then, in February 2017, Prahl received a long phone call from his mother, Pushpa. She pleaded with him to return home. He refused unless Anja could come too. Surprisingly, the family agreed. The couple moved into the Mahit family estate in Lalitpur, a busy and affluent area. At the time, the household included Prahl's parents, his older brother Ujwal's wife Ishwarya, and their young son Anja's new life inside the Mahit home was cold and isolating. She felt the quiet hostility almost immediately. The atmosphere was stiff, the conversations formal, and warmth was in short supply. She wasn't accepted, no matter how respectful or kind she tried to be. Her own parents, still hurt by her earlier choices, had stopped speaking to her. She had no one to confide in. During a major family gathering filled with friends, colleagues, and business partners of Kamal Bahadur, Anja wasn't even allowed to leave her room. It was clear they were ashamed of her. She spent that entire evening alone, crying behind closed doors. Still, Anja persevered. She remained calm, polite, and did everything she could to show respect. Eventually, her father-in-law arranged a corporate job for Prahl, part of a larger business he was connected to. It was both a gesture of support and a way to keep Prahl close. To his credit, Prahl excelled. He worked hard, earned respect, and started building a solid income. Meanwhile, Anja stayed home. The Mahit household ran on strict rules and she had yet to find employment. Her in-laws showed no interest in helping her get one. By May 2017, Anja had had enough. She told Prahl she wanted to pursue a dream she'd carried since her teenage years, opening a small beauty salon in the neighborhood. She had already done the research, scoped out a location, analyzed the local market, and even created a business plan. But she lacked one thing: startup capital. Though Prahl had saved some money, it wasn't enough. He asked his parents for help. They refused, skeptical that her business could succeed. Once again, it was Ujwal who stepped up. He believed in her vision and provided the money she needed to get started. Anja poured her heart into the salon and it paid off. The business became profitable fast. Clients loved her, and her services were in demand. Her in-laws, once cold and doubtful, began to see her in a new light. They started to respect her. They acknowledged her intelligence, her ambition, and her success. Anja had finally earned her place. But one thing still weighed on her. She hadn't reconnected with her parents. She decided to take the first step. Her younger brother had just graduated, and Anja suggested he move to Lalitpur for university. He could live with her in Prahl while pursuing better opportunities. The idea was well received. Both families agreed to meet. During that visit, Anja's parents saw how well the Mahats were treating their daughter and the door. Reconciliation finally opened. Anja began talking to her mother daily. Her brother enrolled in a respected university and moved into the Mahit home, where he was welcomed warmly. Around this time, social media was exploding in Nepal. Anja created personal accounts on multiple platforms, but it was TikTok where she truly flourished. She began posting videos from her salon, skincare routines, product reviews, hair and makeup tutorials. Her natural beauty, charisma, and gentle confidence quickly caught attention. Her videos went viral. Her follower count soared into the tens of thousands. People admired her Hollywood-level looks and authentic charm. Her comment sections overflowed with compliments and appreciation. Anja had built not just a business, but a brand. Before long, a modeling agency reached out. They offered photo shoots, promotional gigs, and eventually, runway shows. For Anja, it was the dream she had always tucked away, now suddenly real. She embraced every opportunity and quickly became a local celebrity. Modeling became her full-time job. Her fees rose rapidly, and soon, she decided to close the beauty salon. The modeling career was not only more rewarding, it was far more lucrative. Her popularity spread beyond Nepal. International agencies took notice, offering her contracts abroad. By late 2018. Anja and Prahl began seriously planning a move to Canada. It was a difficult decision, but a logical next step. When they told their families, the reactions were mixed, cautious, but supportive. Neither set of parents tried to stop them. They offered help with preparations and documents. Everyone hoped the move would mark a new chapter of success. But behind the scenes, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Just as the couple began preparing to leave for Canada, unseen tensions began to rise, and within the walls of that seemingly perfect home, a tragedy was already unfolding. Music fades, soft pause. We'll explore that chilling next chapter in the following episode of Crime Whisper. Until then, breathe deeply, rest fully, and remember some truths lie silent, waiting to be whispered. By the end of 2018, storm clouds had begun to gather over the Mahet household. Anja's brother-in-law, and once her greatest supporter, had been struggling with a debilitating illness. His hearing deteriorated rapidly, and within months, he could no longer continue his work in sound production. The loss of his passion and profession was devastating. Through it all, it was Prahl who stood by him, emotionally present, offering encouragement, checking in daily. Their bond remained strong. But then came the news that would rattle what little stability remained. Prahl and Anja were preparing to move abroad. They had set their sights on Canada. For Ujwal, it was a second loss. And for his wife, it was an opportunity. From the beginning, Ishwarya had taken issue with Anja. Her disdain was sharp, visible, and consistent. Though their marriage had been arranged, carefully orchestrated by their parents, Ishwara came from a powerful high society family and carried herself with a sense of entitlement. Anja, to her, was an outsider, unworthy. When Anja opened her salon and found success, Ishwarya's jealousy became harder to hide. And when Anja's modeling career took off, the resentment turned toxic. Anja was admired, beautiful, poised, ambitious and rising. Even the Mahet parents, who were once hesitant, began to genuinely respect her. Anja had become the family's pride, but to Ishwarya, it was unbearable. She began spreading rumors, insisting that Anja's modeling was just a facade for immoral behavior. She showed family members swimsuit photos and suggested Anja was damaging the family's reputation. Despite these efforts, Anja's husband continued to defend her, standing firm. Eventually, the rest of the family grew tired of Ishwarya's antics, brushing off her accusations as petty and disruptive, so she turned her attention inward toward her own husband. As Ujwal's illness left him isolated at home, Ishwarya seized the opportunity. Day after day, she whispered in his ear that Anja was manipulative, that she was turning the family against him, and that soon, she would take his beloved younger brother away forever. Ujwal, emotionally vulnerable, started to believe it. For a man whose life had been upended by illness, whose purpose was slipping away, the idea of abandonment cut deep. Resentment began to fester, and eventually, it boiled over. Anja had confided in her parents before. She told them how difficult Ishwarya made life in the house, how rumors were weaponized, how cold stares turned into sabotage. Her mother, ever composed, advised her to remain calm and patient. "These are just growing pains," she had said. "It will pass." But it wouldn't. On May 9, 2019, at approximately 4 p.m., the phone rang at the Lama family home. Anja's mother picked up. On the other end was a woman's trembling voice, an in-law from the Mahet household, sobbing and barely coherent. "Please come, quickly," she said. "We need you at the house." It's Anja." The call ended without explanation, but the tone said everything. Though the two homes were just over 60 miles apart, a traffic accident on the highway turned the journey into a 6-hour nightmare by the time Anja's parents arrived. The Mahet estate was surrounded by police cars, yellow tape, and a stunned crowd of neighbors and onlookers. Anja's younger brother was slumped near the front steps, his face buried in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Inside the house, something unthinkable had occurred. A police officer approached Anja's father and quietly asked him to follow. Together, they ascended the staircase up to a room on the second floor. What he saw next would stay with him for the rest of his life. Anja's body lay on the bed, mutilated beyond recognition. Her left hand had been completely severed, her left leg nearly detached above the knee. Her head hung unnaturally, almost severed, her face unrecognizable, brutally disfigured. He stumbled back down the stairs, tears blurring his vision. His wife saw his face and understood instantly. Their daughter was gone. This wasn't an accident. This was a brutal, calculated killing. When her parents demanded answers, demanded arrests, they were told something that made their blood run cold. The killer had already confessed. It was usual, the same man who had once helped them elope, the man Anja had trusted as a brother and friend. According to his confession, Usual had become consumed by the belief that Anja was tearing the family apart. He believed she was turning his brother against him, that she would take Prahl to another country and leave him alone in his suffering. On the day of the murder, most of the household was out. Prahl, Kamal, their father, and Ishwarya were at work. The children were at school. At home were just Anja, Usual, and their mother Pushpa, who was unwell and resting. Around midday, Anja went outside to fill a water container, singing softly as she moved, preparing to water her flowers. Usual watched from the balcony above. Silently, he had already decided what he was going to do. When Anja returned to her room, she lay on the bed, scrolling through her phone. Usual chose his weapon. First, he picked up a kitchen knife butt, then changed his mind. He walked to the storage room and retrieved a kukri, a large, curved traditional blade used by Gurkha soldiers. He climbed the stairs, entered her room. Anja looked up and asked, casually, "What do you need?" Instead of replying, he raised the blade. Her scream came too late. She raised her hand to protect herself. The kukri severed it in a single blow. Usual didn't stop. He struck again and again. 15 wounds in total, each one more devastating than the last. When it was over, Anja was gone, covered in blood. Usual walked to his mother's room. He told her calmly, "It's done." In shock, Pushpa called her husband. Then, together, they called the police but tried to pretend they didn't know the victim. It might seem absurd, even laughable, but Anja's injuries were so severe. Identifying her at first glance was nearly impossible. But when Anja's parents arrived, her father took one look and knew. Usual was arrested on the spot. He confessed in detail, describing the act, handing over the blood-soaked kukri, and even the clothes he wore. In a chilling twist, he had been so frenzied in the final blows, he severed a part of his own finger only. Realizing it after leaving the room, Anja's parents demanded that Ishwarya be arrested as well, accusing her of incitement and psychological manipulation. They believed it was her influence that drove Usual to this unspeakable act, but authorities declined. Usual repeatedly claimed that he acted alone. His parents, desperate to shield their eldest son, hired one of Nepal's top defense attorneys. They spared no expense, but Pralanja's husband stood with her. Music lowers to a slow fade in our next episode. We'll follow the trial, the aftermath, and the shocking way this story ends. Anja Lama Mahida's life was a light, but sometimes the brightest lights draw the darkest shadows. Until then, this is Crime Whisper. Sleep softly, stay safe, and remember, what we bury in silence eventually finds its voice. Prahl stood beside Andrzej's grieving parents, demanding justice and the harshest possible punishment for his own brother. The betrayal ran deep. Usual had once championed his marriage, offered guidance, and even paid for their wedding. He had been family, not just in name, but in action. And yet, that very man had become the monster responsible for Anja's brutal death. What shattered Prahl even more was seeing his own parents stand behind. Usual, they weren't just mourning a tragedy, they were actively working to shield the man who caused it, hiring top legal representation and doing all they could to limit the consequences. To Prahl, it felt like a second betrayal. He wasn't just mourning Anja, he was losing his family too, and so, he made his choice. Prahl aligned himself with Anja's parents, standing with them in court, supporting them through the hearings, and refusing to let his brother's actions be softened or excused. Usual's legal team did everything possible to delay proceedings, but he never changed his story. He feared that altering his account might pull others, like his wife or parents, into the legal crosshairs. After 2 long years, the trial finally concluded. Usual was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But the story didn't end there. Usual and his defense team filed an appeal, this time introducing a new defense: psychological instability. They argued that his mental health had deteriorated after losing his career and his hearing, that the emotional toll had left him impaired, unable to fully grasp the consequences of his actions. The court ordered a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation, but after weeks of assessments, the results were clear. Usual was mentally sound. He had acted with full awareness, understood what he was doing, and showed no signs of severe impairment at the time of the crime. The court upheld the original verdict. Usual Mahet would serve the rest of his life behind bars, with no possibility of parole. Prahl stayed in Nepal until every legal process had been exhausted. He testified in court, supported Anja's family, and honored her memory through every difficult moment. Only after the final judgment was read did he allow himself to move forward. He boarded a plane to Canada, the country he and Anja had once dreamed of calling home. He went alone. Music shifts. Subtle, tense tone begins. Case 3. When two people live together for years, sharing space, responsibilities, and emotional baggage, tensions inevitably build. It's not uncommon for couples to go through crises, accusations of manipulation, resentment, control, narcissism. But while some relationships eventually find healing, others quietly transform into cages where one partner is left to endure the slow erosion of their spirit, sometimes their safety. How do we know when a relationship has crossed that invisible line? The Summers family case would become one of the most polarizing legal sagas in recent memory, one that took over 5 years to fully unravel. At first glance, they seemed like the ideal American family. Behind closed doors, though, something far more disturbing was brewing. Alyssa Jill Summers was born on February 18, 1980, in a quiet suburb of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She grew up in a stable, middle-class home, warm, modest, and supportive. In 1995, at just 15 years old, she met Trevor Stephen Summers, a boy 2 years her senior. They both attended the same high school, crossed paths often, and moved in the same social circles. Their connection started innocently, long conversations between classes, weekend hangouts, shared dreams. But it wasn't until 2 years later that the friendship blossomed into something deeper. The relationship progressed, slowly, intentionally. Both were focused on finishing school, planning for the future. Their parents approved. Friends admired them. They seemed well-matched, thoughtful, kind, and always surrounded by people who spoke highly of them. Some even envied the ease of their connection. In 2001, after 4 years of dating, they got married. Alyssa was 21. Trevor had just turned 23. Everyone believed they were headed for a long, happy life together, and for a while, they were. The young couple moved into a modest home in Philadelphia. By 2003, their first daughter, Arden, was born. In 2006, Alyssa gave birth to their son Landon. Then came Bree, Grady, and Cooper. Alyssa left her career ambitions behind, choosing to become a full-time mom. She poured her energy into the kids and the home to the outside world. The Summers were a picture-perfect family, but inside the home, things were starting to crack. Trevor had always seen himself as the sole provider. When Alyssa stepped into motherhood full-time, the financial burden fell squarely on his shoulders. He started a landscaping business after they moved to Florida in 2004. It collapsed just 3 years later. Then came Alabama, a used car venture that failed. 2. They moved often, state to state. One failed business after another: real estate, pool cleaning, novelty gifts, souvenir shops. Trevor's resume read like a list of hopeful ventures that never made it past the second chapter. Each time, he promised this one would work. Each time, it didn't. Through it all, Alyssa stood by him. She never stopped believing in him, offering support, even when others dismissed him as unrealistic or impulsive. She managed the kids, the home, the relocations. She kept the family moving, smiling, stable. Even when they had to homeschool their kids due to all the transitions, she adapted. Their daughter, Arden, now a teenager, helped her mother hold the household together. But the weight was getting heavier. The cracks were spreading, and soon, the pressure would ignite something far more dangerous. Music fades to a slow suspense tone in our next chapter. We dive deeper into the unraveling of Trevor Summers, how a failing businessman, desperate for control, turned the people closest to him into pawns in a twisted, manipulative plan. Because when the image of a perfect family begins to shatter, sometimes what lies beneath is monstrous. This is Crime Whisper. Stay with us. From a young age, Arden, the eldest of the Summers children, had taken on the role of caretaker. She looked after her younger siblings and was especially close to her father. She was what people often called a daddy's girl, deeply loyal and completely trusting of Trevor. But as the years passed, the family dynamic shifted in a way no one could have predicted. While the household was slowly unraveling, Alyssa tried her best to keep up appearances. Behind the scenes, Trevor's repeated business failures began to wear on him. His frustration turned into paranoia, especially when it came to his wife. He became consumed by the fear that Alyssa would leave him for someone more stable or successful. That fear evolved into something far darker. Trevor began accusing Alyssa of cheating without any proof. He grew increasingly jealous and suspicious of everyone she interacted with. Even casual greetings from neighbors sparked fights. Soon, Trevor demanded she delete all her social media accounts and forbade her from creating new ones. He monitored her calls, scrolled through her texts, and forced her to erase every male contact, including longtime family friends. Then came control over her appearance. First, it was subtle. Don't wear that. Then it escalated. He chose her clothes, banned makeup, told her to wear only dull, modest outfits, and even prohibited perfume or jewelry, aside from her wedding ring. Eventually, Trevor took it even further. He banned her from driving, confiscated her phone, stopped her from leaving the house altogether. Whenever he left, he locked Alyssa inside, along with the younger children. The only one allowed outside was Arden, whom he often took along on errands, trying to convince her that all of this, the control, the restrictions, was for the family's own good. Trevor controlled every aspect of their lives, where they were, who they talked to, what they ate, when they slept. Alyssa suffered the most under this suffocating regime. She was constantly criticized, blamed for every failure, and emotionally crushed. After 15 years of marriage, she finally told Trevor she wanted a divorce. His reaction was swift and brutal. He slapped her, called her worthless, told her no one would ever want a single mother. And just like that, the restrictions tightened even more. Around that same time, Trevor was placed under house arrest due to an ongoing financial misconduct investigation. Now trapped with him 24/7. Alyssa realized she was in real danger. In October 2016, she spent 2 full weeks locked in the home, unable to leave, watched constantly. Trevor made sure she had no access to the outside world. No phone, no contact, no freedom. Then, a sliver of hope. Trevor, no longer under investigation, left the house for a few hours. Alyssa seized the moment. She found a phone, dialed emergency services, and whispered that she was being held against her will. The call was cut short when Trevor returned, but it was enough. The address was logged. Help was already on the way. Police arrived just as Trevor was verbally berating her again. He tried to maintain control, claiming no one had ever been held captive, dismissing Alyssa as emotional and unreliable. But this time, he had no choice. Authorities removed Alyssa and the children from the home. With no money, no belongings, and nowhere to go, Alyssa turned to a local domestic violence support center. They provided shelter, food, and a temporary home. Alyssa wasted no time. She found work, secured a modest rental, and slowly began to rebuild her life, this time on her own terms. Despite everything, she didn't press charges. She just wanted peace, especially for the children. She filed for divorce at first. Trevor called her repeatedly, begging, pleading, insisting they reconcile. But after a while, he seemed to let go. At least it appeared that way. 6 months. After leaving Trevor, Alyssa finally began to feel free. She started opening up again, meeting new people, reclaiming her identity. During this time, she met a man named Jeffrey Matt. Their friendship slowly turned into something more, something hopeful. In the spring of 2017, with the divorce finalized, the former couple agreed to a shared custody arrangement. The children would live with Alyssa, while Trevor had visitation twice a week and weekend overnights. Alyssa was wary, but committed to keeping things civil. Trevor seemed calm, composed, and gave no signs of hostility. Then, in March 2017, he called her unexpectedly. He asked if she could stop by his place to sign a few final documents related to their divorce and property division. His tone was polite. Nothing about the request raised any alarms. Alyssa agreed. She arrived at his home and stepped inside. The door closed behind her, and everything changed. There were no documents. It had all been a lie, a trap. Trevor's demeanor shifted from cordial to cold. He began pleading for her to reconcile. When Alyssa refused, he turned hostile. He accused her of betrayal, screamed at her, then grabbed a large hunting knife, the kind used for dressing game. He pressed it to her throat, then lowered it to her chest, threatening to cut out her heart. Alyssa was frozen in terror. Trevor, disturbingly calm, began describing in detail what he wanted to do, what he planned to do. He held her hostage for 2 agonizing hours. The entire time, Alyssa tried to reach him emotionally, rationally, desperately. She begged him to stop, reminded him that if he hurt her, he'd go to prison, that their children would be left without either parent. Her words, finally, seemed to reach some part of him. Trevor paused, thought it over, and let her go. But before he did, before Alyssa was released, Trevor made her promise she would never tell anyone what had happened, and she did. She gave him her word. But the moment she was far enough from the house, far enough to feel safe, she contacted law enforcement. Trevor Summers was arrested that same evening. Still, he denied everything. He claimed Alyssa was a habitual liar, manipulative, and out for revenge. There were no visible injuries. Her clothes weren't torn. And with no physical evidence, the case became one of her word against his. Without solid proof, Trevor was released. Both he and Alyssa filed for mutual restraining orders. After that, Trevor turned his attention to a new target, the children. He began emotionally manipulating them, especially their eldest daughter, Arden, the one who had always seen him as a hero. Whenever he saw the kids, he spoke wistfully about the past, how much he missed their mother, how he wished things could go back to the way they were. He took them to places the family used to visit together, hoping to trigger fond memories and build emotional confusion. Young and vulnerable, the kids believed he was sincere, and because Trevor had never been aggressive toward them, they had no reason to fear him. Arden was especially loyal, and Trevor knew it. She became the centerpiece of his next plan. Alyssa, on the other hand, had tried her best to protect her kids. She never spoke poorly about their father, not wanting to damage their mental health or pit them against each other, but that silence allowed Trevor to twist the truth. At his request, the children began watching Alyssa, tracking her movements, reporting what she said and did. Together, Trevor and Arden began orchestrating something far more sinister. Saturday, March 11th, 2017. It was supposed to be Trevor's regular weekend visit with the younger kids. He picked them up as scheduled, but that night, he quietly returned to Alyssa's house, headlights off, parking just out of view. He waited for a signal from Arden, who was supposed to unlock the bedroom window once everyone was asleep. When Trevor saw the signal, he told the younger children to stay quiet in the car, saying he had a surprise for their mom. Then he slipped into the house through the cracked window in the darkness. He ambushed Alyssa. He dragged her into the living room, took her phone, and zip-tied her wrists. The terrified children came out of their rooms, confused and scared. Trevor told them to go back to bed. Everything was fine, he said. Then he turned to Arden, his 14-year-old daughter, and handed her the keys to his car. He ordered her to drive her siblings back to his house. She didn't even have a driver's license, but Trevor insisted. He told her he and Alyssa would follow soon in the family SUV. That night, Trevor didn't plan a reunion. He planned revenge. After the kids left, Trevor injected Alyssa with a sedative, something he had prepared in advance. It weakened her, but didn't knock her out completely. He wanted her conscious. He tied her to the bed and violated her. Alyssa drifted in and out of awareness, but Trevor made sure she never fully escaped the horror of what was happening. He spoke about offshore bank accounts, a yacht he'd allegedly purchased, and a fantasy of taking the family away, disappearing to a place no one could find them. He said the family was his, and he would never let them go. Meanwhile, Arden had successfully driven the kids to Trevor's house. It was late. The roads were quiet, and somehow she made it. She parked, brought her siblings inside, and waited for their parents, who never arrived. Back at Alyssa's home, things were escalating quickly. Around 5 a.m., Trevor began suffocating her with a pillow, holding it tight, then letting go, again and again and again, a terrifying pattern of near death and brief relief. After 30 minutes, broken and terrified, Alyssa agreed to do whatever he wanted. Trevor untied her, placed her in the car, and started driving toward the outskirts of the city. At 6 a.m., the vehicle pulled into a 24-hour convenience store. Trevor went inside, and that's when Alyssa saw her chance. Barefoot, partially clothed, wrists still bound, she ran from the car and begged a store employee for help, but Trevor was right behind her. He grabbed her in front of the stunned witness, threw her back into the car, and sped away. The bystander, though shaken, remembered everything the car's make, color, and even the license plate. He gave it all to the police. The moment authorities traced the plate and saw Trevor's name, alarms went off. Restraining orders, a volatile divorce, past reports of abuse. The top priority became locating the children, and fast. They were found at Trevor's home, safe, but confused. They had no idea what had just taken place. One by one, the children were interviewed, and the story they told revealed the depth of manipulation within the Summers household. They hadn't realized how serious their father's actions had been. He had never hurt them. To them, this was just life, their version of normal. But now, even they began to see the truth. Trevor and Alyssa were already far from the city, heading toward an isolated coastal area. He stopped at a small hotel. The family had once visited together. In a bizarre twist, nostalgia overtook him. He began writing what appeared to be a farewell note, then tore it up, started over, and again. Over and over, he wrote and rewrote his final message. Alyssa realized he was planning a murder-suicide and wanted to leave behind a legacy in ink. The search for them lasted 55 hours. Trevor had written several farewell notes. He cut Alyssa's wrist, trying to make it look like she'd harmed herself voluntarily. Then he brought her to Little Harbor, a secluded resort town there. He violated her again and told her, "We're leaving the world together." He looped the cord around her neck and began strangling her. But just then, sirens. Trevor released his grip, bolted for the vehicle, and tried to escape, only to crash head-on into a police cruiser. Officers swarmed the car. Trevor grabbed a razor blade, tried to harm himself, but only managed superficial cuts before being tackled and arrested. Alyssa was finally safe, in custody. Trevor told a wild and disturbing lie. He claimed Alyssa had gone with him willingly, that she'd asked to be restrained, that the violence was part of some shared fantasy, but no one bought it. Prosecutors filed 11 felony charges, including kidnapping, assault, sexual battery, and attempted murder. The trial was delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic, but justice didn't wait forever. While Trevor sat behind bars for nearly 5 years, Alyssa began a new chapter. She married Jeffrey Matt, the man who had supported her through her recovery and helped raise her children. In the spring of 2022, the trial finally began. The most damning pieces of evidence: the farewell notes, the razor blade, the homemade ligature, and the eyewitness who saw Alyssa escape. But perhaps the most powerful testimony came from the children themselves, especially Arden, who bravely described what they witnessed and the role they had unknowingly played. Trevor Summers was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms, with no possibility of parole, and for the first time, Alyssa and her children could finally begin to live without fear. It was the smell that first gave it away, a sharp, unbearable mix of burning and decay. A local man in the woods near Penn, Maharashtra, gathering firewood, paused. The scent was strong, unnatural. Then he saw it, a large black plastic bag, partially buried under soil and dry leaves. Alarmed, he called local authorities. A rapid response team arrived from the Penn district. Inside the bag were human remains burned beyond recognition. The skull, pelvis, and a few long bones were still intact, but the rest of the body had been charred. There were no clothes, no documents, no jewelry, no identification of any kind. The surrounding soil tested positive for traces of gasoline, clear evidence of an attempt to destroy the body and erase all traces of identity. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. The remains were sent to a forensic lab in Mumbai, but yielded nothing. No DNA matches, no missing persons reports aligned with the victim's profile. There were no leads, and so, the case was filed under the most haunting category of all: unidentified, unsolved, forgotten. The file sat in archives for nearly 3 years, until 2015, during an unrelated criminal investigation. A detainee, hoping for leniency, made a chilling offer. He claimed he knew exactly whose body had been found in those woods, and that's when the name Sheena Bora finally surfaced. Sheena Bora was born in 1987 in Shillong, the capital of the Indian state of Meghalaya. Her parents, Indrani Bora and Siddhartha Das, were both young and unprepared for parenthood. Their relationship was turbulent from the start. When Sheena was still a baby, a second child was born, a son named Mikhail. But instead of bringing the family together, the arrival of a second child marked its final unraveling. Both parents quickly separated, and just like that, Sheena and Mikhail were left behind, raised not by their mother or father, but by their maternal grandparents. Indrani left Shillong and moved to Calcutta, enrolling in college. From that point on, she cut ties with her children completely. No visits, no calls, no financial support. It was as if they never existed. Their father, Siddhartha, disappeared from the picture entirely. Back in Shillong, their grandparents did their best with what little they had. There was food, shelter, and school. But there was no real explanation, only vague words like, "Your parents are busy." But Sheena wasn't a child forever. As she got older, she realized the truth. Her mother hadn't been busy. She had chosen to walk away. After college, Indrani married a Calcutta businessman named Sanjeev Khanna. This was her first official marriage, and together they launched a company, hoping to carve out their place in the business world. They had a daughter together, but like every chapter of Indrani's life, this one didn't last. Disagreements and a struggle for control ended the marriage in 2002. Instead of returning to Shillong, to the children she had abandoned, Indrani moved to Mumbai, India's financial capital, a city of extremes, where sprawling slums and glittering high-rises sit side by side. There she began a new life, and she wasn't alone. Indrani entered a relationship with Peter Mukherjee, a prominent media executive and CEO of a major television network. They married. Indrani brought her daughter from her previous marriage, Vidhi, to live with them. Peter eventually adopted her. This marriage was transformative. It gave Indrani access to Mumbai's elite business moguls, celebrities, investors. She became known as a successful entrepreneur, a polished socialite, and a powerful media wife. But to keep this new life intact, Indrani erased her past. She never mentioned Sheena, never acknowledged Mikhail, not even to Peter. To the outside world, to the people she entertained at private screenings and high society galas, those children didn't exist, and that's exactly how she wanted it. In 2006, Sheena, now 19 years old, made a bold decision. She reached out to the mother who had disappeared. She had managed to find Indrani's number and called her on her birthday. It was the first time she had heard her mother's voice in years. The conversation was polite, but cold. Indrani admitted she was living in Mumbai, married, and successful. No apology, no explanation for the past. Still, Sheena asked to reconnect. At first, Indrani was hesitant. Eventually, she made an offer. Sheena could move to Mumbai, but under one condition. She would have to pretend to be Indrani's younger sister. No one in Indrani's life could know the truth. For Sheena, it was an agonizing choice. The promise of Mumbai education, opportunity, a chance to escape poverty, came at the cost of her identity. But in the end, she agreed. Sheena wanted connection. She wanted her mother, and she was willing to sacrifice her name to get it. After leaving Shillong, Sheena Bora arrived in Mumbai, where her mother Indrani was waiting, but not as her mother. To everyone in her life, her friends, her colleagues, even her husband, Peter Mukherjee, Indrani introduced Sheena as her younger sister, and no one questioned it. Within Peter's family, Sheena was simply Indrani's sister. Even Peter had no idea of the truth. Sheena enrolled in university, trying to adjust to her new life in Mumbai, a city that promised opportunity but came at the price of her identity. She wanted to rebuild some kind of bond with her mother, even if it meant living a lie. But Indrani made it clear, the past was off limits. No mention of her childhood, no mention of her brother Mikhail, no mention of their grandparents in Shillong. Any attempt to talk about it was immediately shut down. At first, Sheena tried to accept the arrangement. After all, she now had access to things she'd never had before: education, stability, a future. But over time, the weight of the deception began to wear her down. Sheena was being asked to erase herself, her story, her place in the world, her very identity. Her mother remained distant, emotionally unavailable, and offered no comfort. Sheena often felt like a stranger in the one relationship she had fought so hard to reclaim. What made things worse was the instability of her situation. Indrani gave no clear commitment to Sheena's future, no promise of how long she could stay, no clarity about money or support. Sheena was completely dependent on someone who refused to even call her daughter. Still, she stayed, because somewhere deep down, Sheena believed that time might heal things. That maybe, just maybe, her mother would one day accept her, even in private, at the Mukherjee household. Sheena began spending time with Rahul Mukherjee, Peter's adult son from a previous relationship. They were close in age, shared similar interests, and both understood the pressures of living under domineering parental shadows. Their connection grew quickly, from friendship to romance. In a home filled with tension and restraint, their bond felt like freedom. For a while, no one noticed. But when Indrani realized that Sheena and Rahul were more than just friends, her demeanor changed overnight. She was furious. She demanded the relationship end immediately. Her explanation, that romantic relationships within a family, even without blood ties, were inappropriate. But there was more beneath the surface. Indrani knew that if Sheena and Rahul grew serious, the truth might come out. The illusion she had carefully built, that Sheena was her sister, not her daughter, would collapse. So she tried everything: persuasion, pressure, even manipulation. At one point, Indrani sent Sheena back to Shillong to stay with her grandparents, hoping distance would break the connection. It didn't. If anything, it made it stronger. Rahul kept in touch the entire time, texting, calling, making plans. And when Sheena returned to Mumbai, she no longer relied on her mother. Rahul helped her find a place to live, and supported her financially. This independence further threatened Indrani's control, but Sheena didn't back down. She stayed with Rahul, and Rahul still believed she was simply Indrani's sister, unaware of the tangled truth just beneath the surface. On April 24th, 2012, Sheena made plans to meet Indrani. According to Indrani, it was supposed to be a casual dinner. Despite the tension between them, Sheena was still trying, still hoping for even the smallest gesture of acceptance. That evening, after work, Rahul picked Sheena up. They spent a few hours together. Then he dropped her off at the agreed meeting spot. He watched as she walked toward a car where Indrani was waiting. There was a driver in the front and another unknown person in the back. Sheena got into the vehicle. Rahul didn't think anything of it at the time, but Sheena never came home. Rahul began calling her, no answer. Then a message came through. It said everything was fine, and that she was spending the night at Indrani's. But something about it didn't sit right. It was cold, flat, emotionless. It didn't sound like her at all. He responded, asking her to call or leave a voice message. There was no reply. Later, another message arrived. It was even more jarring. It said Sheena was leaving, that she wanted to end their relationship, and that Rahul should never call or text again. It was completely out of character. Just days earlier, they'd been making long-term plans. There had been no arguments, no tension, nothing that explained this sudden shift. Rahul knew something was wrong. He tried again and again to reach her calls, texts, anything, but every attempt went unanswered. The next morning, Rahul contacted Indran. At first, she ignored his calls. When she finally responded, her story was vague. She claimed Sheena had ended the relationship voluntarily, that she was under pressure, and had decided to take a break, possibly even travel abroad. But Rahul didn't buy it. It didn't add up: the abrupt disappearance, the uncharacteristic messages, the total silence. It all pointed to something darker. He reached out to Peter Mukherjee. Peter repeated the same story. Sheena had left of her own will and didn't want to be contacted. Rahul was done waiting. He went to the police. but they wouldn't take a missing person report. Sheena was an adult, they said, legally free to disappear if she wanted to. They needed proof that she was in danger, and without any, they wouldn't open a case. Rahul showed them the text messages, insisting they didn't sound like her, but it wasn't enough. He kept returning to the station, pleading with them to trace her phone, to contact mobile providers, anything. But each time, the response was the same. No evidence, no investigation. The police response never changed. Without direct evidence of a threat, they refused to intervene. Sheena Bora had vanished, and officially, no one was looking for her. Days turned into weeks. Still, no calls, no texts, no social media activity. Nothing. Rahul Mukherjee grew more desperate. He reached out to her university, her workplace, even mutual friends. But the answer was always the same. No one had seen Sheena since the night she went to meet Indrani. He returned to the police, pleading to at least document her disappearance. But they refused. She's an adult, they said. She has the right to disappear. They wouldn't even file a report. Rahul refused to accept that. He contacted Sheena's grandparents in Shillong, the ones who had raised her. They hadn't heard from her either. There were no phone calls, no updates. They were worried, but powerless. And so was her younger brother, Mikhail, who also reached out to Indrani and got no clear answers. The signs were unmistakable. There was no record of Sheena leaving the city, no airline tickets, no hotel stays, no paper trail at all. Rahul was certain now. Something terrible had happened the night Sheena got into that car. Still, the police did nothing. No search, no media attention, no headlines. Sheena Bora had simply vanished, and the world moved on. Only 3 people kept pushing for answers: Rahul, Mikhail, and Sheena's elderly grandparents. Then, 3 years later, everything changed. In 2015, in Mumbai, police arrested a man named Shyamvar Rai on charges of illegally possessing firearms. He was caught with several unlicensed weapons, and the arrest opened up a deeper criminal investigation. At first, it had nothing to do with Sheena, until Rai made an unexpected offer. Facing serious prison time, he told investigators, "I know what happened to a girl back in 2012. At first, officers didn't take him seriously, but as he continued, his story took a chilling turn." He said, "The girl was Sheena Bora, and she hadn't just disappeared. She had been murdered by none other than Indrani Mukherjee, the woman who claimed to be her sister." Rai explained that he had been Indrani's personal driver. He often carried out private errands for her, some of which, he now realized, had been part of a larger plan. On April 24, 2012, Indrani instructed him to pick up Sheena for what she said was a casual dinner. Rahul had dropped Sheena off that evening, unaware that the car she was getting into held not just Indrani, but also Sanjeev Khanna, Indrani's ex-husband. According to Rai, shortly into the drive, Sheena was offered a drink. Minutes later, she became visibly unwell. She slumped in her seat, and soon, she lost consciousness. Rai kept driving, as instructed. The car left the city and headed toward the forests near Pen, a remote wooded area on the outskirts of Mumbai. When they stopped, Sanjeev held Sheena's limp body, and in the back seat of the car, Indrani carried out the murder. Rai said she didn't hesitate. She was composed, prepared, as if this was all according to plan. They placed Sheena's body in a large black plastic bag, one Rai had been told to keep ready in the trunk earlier that day. Then, deeper into the woods, in the dead of night, they poured a flammable substance over the bag and set it ablaze. Rai remembered the flames, how they stood there, watching them burn. Only once the fire was nearly out did they leave. His confession matched every detail of an unsolved case from 2012. The charred human remains found in the Pen forest, remains that had never been identified. Until now, Rai claimed he hadn't done this willingly. He was in financial distress, Indrani had promised to help with his family's medical bills in exchange for his silence. Meanwhile, back in Mumbai, Rahul never gave up. He'd kept digging, gathering Sheena's old text messages, personal notes, and scraps of correspondence. Sheena had written about the pressure she was under, about the pain of living a false life, about being forced to pretend she wasn't who she really was. With enough persistence, Rahul finally got the authorities to order a DNA test, and that's when everything unraveled. The test proved what he had long suspected. Sheena Bora was not Indrani's sister. She was her biological daughter. The truth shattered the illusion Indrani had spent years maintaining. Suddenly, her motives came into sharper focus. In Mumbai's elite social scene, where status was everything, having a grown daughter from a previous relationship could have destroyed her carefully curated image. Even Peter Mukherjee, her husband, didn't know. Their entire marriage was built on a fabricated identity. There was also money. If Sheena had been legally acknowledged as Indrani's daughter, she would have had a rightful claim to Indrani's assets. That could have impacted not only Indrani's standing, but also Peter's estate and the future of their younger daughter. Throughout this entire ordeal, Rahul received no support. Peter's family turned against him. Indrani accused him of trying to smear their name. Still, he didn't stop. He went to the press. He found lawyers. He fought for Sheena when no one else would. And finally, with Shivers Rai's confession in hand, the case exploded. Arrests followed swiftly. Indrani Sanjeev Khanna, and even Peter Mukherjee. All three were taken into custody. The charges were based on Rai's detailed testimony, Sanjeev's partial confession, and the DNA evidence that exposed the truth. Sanjeev confirmed key parts of the story, from the drink Sheena was given, to the body being burned in the forest. But just as investigators began building their case, they hit a chilling roadblock. The surveillance footage from the Mukherjee residence, covering the day Sheena disappeared, was missing. Every other day was accounted for, but April 24th, 2012, gone. There were no recordings, no surveillance footage, no explanation. The surveillance system at the Mukherjee residence had captured footage on every day except one. April 24th, 2012, the day Sheena Bora disappeared. No one could say why the footage from that single day had vanished, and without it, the prosecution lacked one of the most critical pieces of evidence. No forensic traces were recovered, no blood in the vehicle, no fibers on the accused clothing. Back in 2012, the police had failed to act swiftly, and the opportunity to preserve vital evidence was lost forever. The case had been mishandled from the beginning. That negligence would become the prosecution's greatest weakness, and the defense knew it. Indrani and Peter Mukherjee had access to the best legal defense teams in the country. They picked apart the investigation. They cast doubt on the credibility of Shivers Rai, claiming he only named names in exchange for a lighter sentence. Sanjeev Khanna's confession. They said it was made under pressure, coerced. Even the DNA evidence was challenged. The defense raised the possibility of lab contamination or tampering. What should have been an open and shut case began to unravel in court, despite the confessions, despite matching timings, despite the forensic evidence and motive. No one was convicted. By 2022, the legal system had done all it would do. Everyone had been released from custody. Indrani Mukherjee, Sanjeev Khanna, Peter Shivers Rai. The charges were never dropped, but no formal sentence was ever delivered. Justice was deferred and eventually forgotten. Even Rai, the man whose testimony had reignited the investigation, walked free. His cooperation and lack of prior serious offenses earned him leniency. Sanjeev, who admitted to helping dispose of Sheena's body, faced no lasting consequences. Peter was never proven to have taken part directly. He was let go, and the woman at the center of the entire story continued to claim innocence. While out on bail, only Rahul Mukherjee remained. Still searching, still fighting. The courts had failed him. So had the system. So had the truth. Despite having evidence, testimony, a clear motive, and a confirmed identity of the victim, Sheena Bora's death was never legally classified as murder. There were no convictions, no sentences, no legal closure. Sheena's story faded from headlines, from public memory, and from the official record. Rahul refused to let her be forgotten, not because he wanted attention, not for revenge, but because Sheena Bora deserved to be seen, not erased. He risked isolation, threats, and backlash. He had no illusions about the power the people he challenged still held, but he wasn't going to stop, not until her story was acknowledged, not until someone called it what it was, a crime. Transition music's low, unsettling tone, Case 5E, the 31st floor of a sleek, residential high-rise, in the heart of Hong Kong. Police stood outside, apartment 1309, answering a strange and disturbing call. It hadn't come from a neighbor or a passer. It had come from inside, from the owner himself. His voice over the phone had been flat, almost emotionless. Something terrible has happened. You need to come immediately. When officers arrived, there was no answer, but from beneath the door, a heavy, suffocating odor leaked into the hallway. Decay. The building's security guard confirmed that. Residents had been complaining about the smell for days. Police knocked again. Still no response. Only faint noises. A man murmuring, talking to himself behind the door. Eventually, they forced their way in. The stench hit first thick, putrid, undeniable. Inside, the apartment was in disarray. Stained walls, scattered clothing, food containers, empty liquor bottles. And then they saw her, a young woman's body, lying on the floor, partially undressed, with visible neck and chest wounds. She had clearly been dead for some time. Not far away sat a man barefoot, blood-stained, unblink. In one hand, he held a knife. His lips moved constantly, murmuring about God, evil, and the final week. He was incoherent, detached from reality. Police restrained him and called for emergency medical personnel. Then they began documenting the scene. On the table, open alcohol bottles, powdery substances on saucers, takeaway boxes. On the floor, tangled cords, plastic bags, pill wrappers, discarded clothes. It was chaos, a scene of prolonged disorder and isolation. But nothing prepared them for what was waiting just beyond the sliding glass door to the balcony. An officer approached. The door was sealed shut. When he finally forced it open, the smell hit him again, this time worse. There, in the corner of the balcony, a large black suitcase, heavy, bulging, leaking, inside, the remains of a second woman, her body dismembered, parts carefully wrapped in cloth and tightly packed inside. This wasn't a hurried disposal. It was deliberate concealment. Whoever had done this had taken their time. Both victims were young women. Both appeared to be of East Asian descent. No IDs, no phones, no personal effects. Their names, their lives, even their time of death, unknown. But one thing was obvious. Whatever happened in that apartment, it hadn't happened overnight. The man found in the apartment was placed in high-security custody. He bore no signs of injury. He was conscious, but mentally, he was fractured. He offered no coherent explanation, only fragments about blood, sin, and a week of judgment. Hong Kong is one of the most crowded urban centers in the world, a city of vertical life where millions live shoulder to shoulder in glittering towers and tight back alleys, in neighborhoods packed with karaoke lounges, unmarked clubs, and private entertainment bars. An underground world thrives in plain sight. Officially, many of these venues are registered as social spaces where women are paid to entertain guests with nothing more than conversation. But in reality, some operate as fronts for escort services, private arrangements, and transactions not meant to be seen. They're not advertised, but certain circles know exactly where to go. The women who worked in Hong Kong's underground entertainment clubs often had no legal protection. Most didn't hold valid work permits. They couldn't ask for help. They couldn't report mistreatment. Any complaint could lead to one outcome: deportation. Many of these women came from impoverished regions in Indonesia and the Philippines. Most initially arrived in Hong Kong on domestic helper visas, legal employment, living in their employers' homes. The work was hard, the hours long, but it was steady. It meant survival for themselves and for the families waiting back home when those work permits expired. Some went back, but the poverty never changed. So they returned on tourist visas, unable to work legally, but desperate for income. Clubs became their only option. Officially, these clubs were bars with entertainment. In reality, they operated off the books. Women were hired to dance, chat, pour drinks, but more often than not, they were expected to arrange private meets in exchange for money. There were no contracts, no protections, no oversight, and absolutely no room to say no. Disappearing in this world wasn't rare. When one woman didn't show up, people assumed she'd moved on, gotten spooked, deported, or simply left. There were no emergency contacts, no HR departments, no unions, just silence. Many of these women lived in cramped, undocumented apartments, rented for cash, shared with several others. It kept them invisible. And when someone didn't come home one night, nobody filed a report. Not right away. Samardi Ningai was born in a remote village in Indonesia. Her childhood was marked by hardship. Her family could barely afford food, medicine, or school supplies. When she came of age, the decision was clear. She would go abroad to work. She arrived in Hong Kong as a domestic helper, working for 2 years until her visa expired. Then she returned home only to find nothing had improved. Desperate, Samarte secured a tourist visa and went back. She couldn't work legally anymore, but the money was essential. That's how she ended up at a downtown club. Jessie Larina's path was similar. Also from Indonesia, she arrived in 2006 on a work visa and remained legally employed for years. But when her renewal was denied in 2012, she too returned home, then came back on a tourist visa, hoping to find a way to earn again. Both women ended up working at the same club. On the surface, they were entertainers. In reality, they lived at the mercy of the club's management, under constant risk and control. There were no complaints allowed, no refusals, no second chances. Samarti disappeared on October 26th. She had worked her shift, spent time with clients, and left the club. She was never seen again. Jessie vanished 6 days later, on November 1st. She too worked at night, left with a customer, and never returned home. At the time, no one connected the two cases. No alarms were raised. No investigation was launched. They had no legal status, no documentation, no official presence in the system. Their disappearances made no headlines, but Jessie had a roommate, one of the few people who noticed. After Jessie failed to return, the roommate visited the club. She was told Jessie had left with a customer, a man who came in often, quiet, alone, and always generous with tips. She tried calling Jessie. No answer. Texted. Nothing. Finally, the roommate went to the police. After days of pleading, a missing person report was filed. Police obtained surveillance footage from the club. There, Jessie was seen with the same man, tall, well-dressed, soft-spoken, a frequent visitor, known by the staff. The club identified him as Rurik Judding, a 29-year-old British banker. He lived in a luxury high-rise on the 31st floor. That's where he had taken Jessie. The night she vanished, police reached out to Judding. There was no response then. Suddenly, he called them himself. His voice was calm, detached. He said, "Something terrible has happened in my apartment. You need to come immediately." When officers arrived, they were met with silence. The hallway outside apartment 3101 reeked of decay. Neighbors had complained about the odor for days. There was no answer from inside, only the faint sound of someone murmuring behind the door. The police broke in. The scene inside was horrifying. The body of a woman later confirmed to be Jessie lay on the floor, partially clothed and covered in wounds. The apartment was in disarray: bottles, restraints, drug paraphernalia, digital devices, and on the balcony, inside a large black suitcase, was the dismembered body of a second woman, carefully packed, partially wrapped in towels, burn marks on the plastic. They had both died there, in the same apartment, at different times. Security footage from the high-rise showed the truth. Each woman had entered the building on separate days. Neither had been seen leaving. No one questioned it. No one stopped it. Judding had a key card, unrestricted access. The doorman recognized him. He was part of the city's financial elite, and no one ever suspected a thing. When arrested, Judding didn't resist. He confessed calmly. There were no signs of panic, no remorse. He appeared almost relieved. Rurik Judding had grown up in a comfortable London suburb. His parents were middle-class professionals, hard-working, attentive. They provided every opportunity: private schools, Cambridge University, a job at one of the world's most prestigious investment banks. To everyone who knew him, he was the success story: polished, ambitious, brilliant. He was also deeply disturbed. Behind closed doors, Rurik Judding was spiraling. Rurik Judding was always an introvert. He kept a small, tight circle, avoided emotional entanglements. He showed little interest in public life. To those around him, he came across as reserved, intelligent, competent, never quite known. There was a subtle arrogance beneath the surface, a quiet sense that he believed himself a cut above others. He didn't share much. Professionally, he performed well enough to rise through the ranks. Personally, no one really knew him. The first significant disruption in his life came through love. He'd been dating a woman named Sarah, long-distance relationship. She was based in the US, he in Hong Kong. By all accounts, Rurik took the relationship seriously. He was deeply attached to her. Then, suddenly, it ended. Sarah had met someone else. She gave him no warning, just moved on. Judding took the breakup hard. He spiraled into depression, began therapy, and was prescribed medication. But his emotional unraveling had already begun. His demeanor shifted. He became volatile, distant, increasingly erratic at work. Deadlines were missed. Colleagues noticed he was no longer the high-performing banker they'd once known. The cracks were widening. Soon, his life began to fracture completely. He started experimenting with drugs, began attending underground parties, engaged in erratic, emotionally charged relationships. At one point, he was involved with Aryan Guinea Young, attractive woman active on social media. Their life online looked glamorous: 5-star hotels, rooftop dinners, private flights. But behind the filters were violent arguments, emotional outbursts, and a growing detachment in Rurik's behavior. The drugs made him paranoid, impulsive, cruel. Eventually, Aryan left him. From that point on, Rurik completely unraveled. He isolated himself, stopped showing up at work, fell off the social grid. Those who tried to contact him were either ignored or pushed away. He was erratic, often hostile. Even his former friends began to avoid him. Then came the disturbing online behavior. His social media posts turned cryptic, filled with metaphors of death, darkness, and internal destruction. One post, dated October 27th, read like a farewell. Note: I'm jumping into the darkness. The journey has begun. I'm not afraid. The first step is the hardest. Few understood what it meant. No one intervened. The very next day, he resigned from his job. No explanation, no discussion, just a sudden disappearance from the financial world. His work email auto-reply raised alarms, but not action. It read, "I am out of the office, indefinitely. Please do not contact the psychopath. In case of emergency, contact God, though I suspect custody has passed to the devil." Most dismissed it as some twisted attempt at humor, but in reality, Rurik Judding was no longer spiraling. He had already reached the bottom, following his arrest and the horrifying discovery in his 31st floor Hong Kong apartment. The investigation began. When police searched his phone, they found dozens of video files. Each clip meticulously documented his actions, thoughts, and reflections during and after the murders of Samardi Ningsi and Jessie Lorena. There was no ambiguity, no question of guilt. In the first video, recorded shortly after Samardi's death, Rurik sat calmly beside her body and said, "My name is Rurik. 5 minutes ago, I killed this woman. She was here since Saturday. Today is Monday. I kept her locked up. She was good, but that doesn't mean anything." His tone was flat, almost clinical. He spoke as if narrating an experiment, not recounting a murder. In other videos, he rambled about his days inside the apartment, how he survived on pizza deliveries, alcohol, and drugs. He described feeling disconnected from himself, admitting, "I don't feel guilt. There's something, but it's not guilt. I feel like a stranger to myself." These were not the actions of a man in a psychotic episode. They were planned, premeditated, and meticulously documented. Surveillance footage confirmed his every move. He was seen leaving the apartment with 2 large duffel bags. He returned carrying saws, knives, and kitchen tools. He used them to dismember. Samarti's body then stuffed the remains into a heavy-duty suitcase and left it out on the balcony. And still, he stayed. He didn't try to run, didn't try to clean the scene. Instead, a few days later, he returned to the same club where he'd found Samardi. There, he approached Jessie Lorena, offered her money to come back to his apartment. This time, he didn't wait. He killed her that very night. When police arrived, Jessie's body was still in the center of the room. Judding sat beside her, covered in blood, holding a knife, speaking nonsense. It wasn't a mystery. It was a confession laid bare in flesh and footage. In one recording, he stated chillingly, "That was an experience. I want to do it again." Following his arrest, Rurik Judding gave a full confession calmly, plainly, without hesitation. He described how he kept Samardi locked in the apartment for days, how he inflicted pain, and how he finally killed her. Investigators said his tone was flat. No remorse. No emotion. The court ordered a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation. Multiple experts examined him, and the conclusion was unanimous. Rurik Judding was mentally sound. He understood the nature and consequences of his actions, though diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder marked by grandiosity, lack of empathy, and emotional detachment. This did not render him unfit to stand trial. The defense argued otherwise. They claimed he was emotionally unstable, overwhelmed by heartbreak, addiction, and mental health issues. Former girlfriends were brought in to testify. They spoke of a man who had once been caring, polite, and functional, but the prosecution pushed back hard. The evidence was overwhelming. The murders were not impulsive. They were deliberate, strategic, and filmed. Judding wasn't out of control. He was fully in control and chose violence. In October 2016, the Hong Kong High Court delivered its verdict. Rurik Judding was found guilty on 2 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole to this day. His crimes remain among the most horrifying in Hong Kong's modern history, not because of how brutal they were, but because they were so methodical, so self-aware, and so completely void of conscience. A man raised in privilege, educated at the world's best universities, respected in his industry, loved once, and behind it all, a predator who filmed every step of his descent. Rurik Judding didn't break. He made a choice. 2 murders, 2 life sentences, no possibility of parole. Rurik Judding would spend the rest of his life behind bars, As the verdict was read, he showed no emotion, no tears, no anger, no remorse, just a blank stare, no movement, no reaction. Even when it became clear that he would never walk free again, he remained motionless. The silence in that courtroom felt heavier than the sentence itself. Despite his confessions and hours of video documenting the horrors, he never gave a clear answer to the question that haunted everyone: why did you do it? The court took his silence as a final act of cruelty, proof of his total lack of remorse, and evidence that his violence was a conscious, chilling choice. Case 6. I really don't want to go to sleep anymore, Robin whispered. It makes me too scared. She repeated it over and over. I don't want to go to sleep. On the night of September 30th, 2005, Robin had a nightmare, a dream filled with gunshots so loud they shook her awake. Only, it wasn't a dream. The sounds were real. Gunfire thundered through her family's farmhouse, then screams. Her mother's screams. Robin shot up in bed, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then footsteps, heavy, unfamiliar, moving quickly, coming closer. The sound of boots slamming against wood grew louder, dashed closer. She dove back under her covers, trembling, hoping she could disappear. Then came the gunshots again. 2 of them. One bullet grazed her leg. The other tore past her arm. She stayed frozen, silent. Then, the footsteps turned, headed for her brother Zach's room. More gunshots. No screams this time. Just a faint, aching moan. Then nothing. Silence, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that lets you know everything has changed forever. Robin lay still for 2.5 hours, afraid to breathe, afraid to move, afraid the footsteps might come back. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and blood. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, had become a tomb. But she couldn't stay there forever. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, Robin stepped over the blood-soaked hallway, picked up the phone, and dialed 911. Her fingers shook, her voice cracked, but she made the call, and in doing so, she became the lone voice left to tell the story. The 911 call came in just before sunrise. A child's voice, small, terrified, desperate. She begged for someone to come. She wanted the nightmare to stop. The dispatcher tried to calm her down, promising help was on the way. But out on a rural road in Alba, Texas, help doesn't always come fast. Robin was alone in a house where love had once lived, now filled with only echoes and blood. Texas State Trooper Chad Brooks heard the call come through. He hit the gas, but no matter how fast he drove, it felt like it would never be fast enough. I heard my mama scream. Robin cried into the phone. Brooks's chest tightened. He knew this wasn't just a report. It was a child's life on the line. Journalist Erin Moriarty from 48 Hours would later ask, why this house? Why this family? Whoever had pulled the trigger didn't just murder a household. They'd left something behind. A witness, 15. Bullets had been fired that night, and yet Traben Dawn survived. She gave the dispatcher clear directions, Highway 70, about 13.3 miles from the bowling alley. She said she was wearing a purple shirt and purple pants. She wanted to make sure the officers could recognize her, asterisk naming her clothes. That was her way of holding on to reality, because her world had collapsed. Trooper Brooks's headlights finally lit up the gravel driveway. Standing at the edge of the house was a small girl, clutching a phone like a lifeline. She ran straight to him. He caught her. For a brief moment, she was just a terrified little girl in his arms. Robin spoke fast, shaking, breathless, telling him everything. What she'd heard, what she'd seen. She didn't cry. Not yet. She was focused, clear, but he knew nothing about this was okay. He couldn't take her back inside. So he locked her safely in the patrol car, and then officers entered the house. Guns drawn. The home was still. Too still, no struggle. No overturned furniture, just life, interrupted. A coffee pot ready for the next morning, a nursery being prepared for a new baby, pictures on the wall, then dash destruction. The east door had been kicked in. Brian Conrad shot 3 times. Michelle Conrad 6 bullets. Even the family dog, Molly, had been shot twice. Robin sat in the patrol car, watching the front door. She didn't know what the officers were seeing. She only knew what she was hoping. That someone, anyone would, come out alive. But no one did. And in that silent, broken Texas dawn, Robin realized the truth. She was alone. Had the bullet struck an inch deeper, Robin wouldn't have lived. But she had, and that meant something. That meant she had to carry the truth. Her brother Zach hadn't been so lucky. He'd been shot 3 times in his sleep. He never woke up, and for that Robin would later say she was grateful. He hadn't suffered back. At the scene, Robin asked Trooper Brooks for one small thing. Not food, not water. She just wanted to feed her animals, so they went to the barn. She tossed hay to the goats. For a moment, she laughed. She told him how she and Zach used to make it a game, a race to feed them fastest. For a few minutes, life almost felt normal again. Then they stepped away, and reality came crashing back. She clung to his arm and asked, the question no child should ever have to ask, "Are my mom and Brian coming back?" She already knew the answer, but she needed someone to say it. No, they weren't coming back. No one else was. Later that day, Robin was taken to the Bridge Children's Advocacy Center. She sat in a small, windowless room, the camera rolling, her small voice steady, and for the first time, the world began to hear the story she had survived to tell. A camera stared down from the ceiling. A microphone hovered near her mouth, ready to capture every fragile word. Robin sat across from a child advocate in a small, quiet room. She had answered these questions before too many times, but each time felt like ripping open the same wound. She whispered the same fear she had told the 911 dispatcher. "I don't want to go to sleep. That's when the bad stuff comes back." She repeated it over and over. "I don't want to close my eyes." The advocate spoke gently, guiding her back through the terror. The gunshots, the screams, the heavy footsteps, and then the worst part, the silence. When asked if she had heard anyone speak that night, Robin shook her head. No one said a word, she whispered. Just a shadow moving through the house, stealing every life it touched. She described what she remembered. A flash from the gun, a pale face in the dark. Investigators leaned in. Even the smallest detail could unlock a door. "How many shots?" one of them asked. 15, she answered instantly, and when the crime scene was processed, they found exactly that. 15 shell casings, 15 bullets, a number etched forever into the memory of a 10-year-old girl at 3 a.m. That was all Robin could take. She reached her emotional limit. The interview ended, but for law enforcement, this was just the beginning. They had no suspects, no motive, no explanation, and worst of all, no assurance the killer wouldn't strike again. Robin was placed under round-the-clock protection. She was moved to a secure location to live with her biological father, stepmother, and stepsister. Surveillance cameras lined the property. She wasn't allowed outside except once, for the funeral. The community came together in sorrow, but also fear. The Conrads had been the kind of family everyone admired. Hard-working, quiet, kind. Their deaths shattered that small-town peace like glass. Robin sat in the church pew, her eyes locked on 3 coffins, her mother, her stepfather, and her brother. She kept glancing from one to the other, then back again, and again, as if she still couldn't believe it was real. At the same time, the Texas Rangers scanned the funeral crowd, watching for any strange behavior, but nothing stood out. Across town, people began locking their doors at night. Rifles that had long gathered dust were moved beside beds. Parents held their kids a little tighter before sleep. Fear had settled into every home. Somewhere out there, a killer was still free. Investigators worked day and night, combing through every piece of evidence. Shell casings, blood patterns, unfamiliar footprints in the hallway, tire tracks in the dirt, but they had nothing definitive. No DNA, no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, and nothing was missing, not a single item. This wasn't a robbery, so what was it? One theory surfaced, a drug hit, maybe even a mistake, the wrong house. But every lead ended in a dead end, and the most important question remained unanswered. Who did this? Meanwhile, in Missouri, investigators were working another case, the murders of the McCool family. At that crime scene, detectives found something strange. The bullets used weren't standard, they were rare, hard to find, not something you'd buy off the shelf. A deputy remembered a recent burglary report. A man named Scott King had reported that his son, Levi King, had broken into his home and stolen multiple firearms. The ammunition from that theft matched the McCool murders. The hunt was on. Not long after, just as the Missouri sun began to rise, Matthew McCool received a call from a worried relative. They'd been trying to reach his mother, Dawn McCool, all morning, but no one was picking up. At first, Matthew wasn't alarmed. His mom missing a few calls wasn't unheard of. But by noon, he felt the pull in his gut. He left work and drove toward the family home, white-knuckling the wheel the whole way. When he arrived, a relative stood outside, pale and shaking. "They're dead," the man said quietly. Just like that. No build-up, no preparation, just an ending. Inside, detectives found a grim scene. Shell casings sparkled under the ceiling light, each one a silent witness to the massacre. The bullet casings matched the stolen guns. The ammunition linked directly to Levi King, a name already known to law enforcement. He was a ghost in the system. He'd set fire to a neighbor's house years earlier, served a short prison sentence, then vanished from a halfway house down. The McCool family was gone, their blood soaked into the floorboards, their lives stolen by someone who moved through the night like a shadow. A Dodge Dakota, stolen from the McCool home, became key to the search. Hundreds of miles away, a Border Patrol officer in El Paso, Texas, noticed something off during a routine stop. A suspicious man behind the wheel. The plates came back stolen. The man gave his name, Levi King. Officers found weapons in the truck bed. King didn't resist. He barely blinked. His calm was unsettling to calm, but just 15 minutes into his interrogation, he spoke. "I shot him first." He spun around, then dropped. When asked about the woman, his expression flickered. He admitted he'd killed her out of fear. Missouri now had their man. He pled guilty. 2 life sentences. But before he was extradited, King leaned forward, his voice low, his words haunting. "There's 4 more in Texas." Detectives froze. Was he bluffing? Was he toying with them? A phone call to Texas confirmed the unimaginable. Another family had been killed, just days earlier. The Don family. Robin's family. Levi King had murdered 6 people across 2 states, driven hundreds of miles, left a child alive in a house of corpses. Why? No one knew. Maybe not even him. Missouri sentenced him first. Texas wanted blood. The courtroom in Gray County was filled with grief and rage. King sat emotionless as prosecutors laid out his crimes. District Attorney Lynn Switzer didn't sugarcoat it. "There are people who are just evil. Levi King is one of them." 12 jurors held his fate. Switzer asked for the death penalty, but defense attorney Joe R. Wilson begged them to consider life without parole. No freedom, no hope, just a cell and the weight of his crimes. After 8 painful hours of deliberation, the jury returned. 1 juror refused to sentence King to death. Just one. The result: life without parole. Robin Don, the only survivor of that nightmare, sat frozen as the verdict was read. She looked at Switzer and saw the pain in her eyes. It almost looked like she had failed us, Robin would later say. But she knew better. Switzer had fought hard. She'd fought for Robin's family, and for that there were no words strong enough. Levi King was sent back to Missouri to serve his sentence. Robin didn't care where he went. She just wanted him gone. "Texas is my state," she said. "I don't want you here. You've done enough damage." But even with King locked away, Robin's battle wasn't over. Pampa, once her home, was now haunted. Every street held a memory. Every silence echoed with what she'd lost. Leaving felt like giving up. Staying felt like suffocating. The nightmares never stopped. Her former coach, Denise Mackey, watched the girl she once cheered on carry wounds no one could see. Late at night, Robin would send messages. "I hear things. I'm scared." She wore long sleeves, long pants, socks even in summer. Superstition, a ritual, a shield. That night, "I had on socks, long sleeves, and pants," she'd say. "So now, I wear them every night, because I lived." The first time Jill called the police, they told her to calm down. The second time, they suggested she give it time, maybe seek counseling. No report was filed, no follow-up, no protection. By the time of the third and fourth incidents, the situation had escalated. Jill had bruises photographed, statements from neighbors who heard Carl shouting, throwing objects, threatening her. One even saw him drag her by the hair into the house. This time, the police seemed to take it seriously. They opened two investigations and forwarded both case files to the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, responsible for deciding whether to press charges. But both times, nothing happened. The CPS declined to prosecute. They claimed there wasn't enough evidence, that Jill wasn't a reliable witness. Why? Because after one incident, she went back, not for love, not for reconciliation, but maybe out of fear, or financial dependency, or the desperate hope that things might change. But none of that was considered. No one paused to reflect on what survivors of domestic abuse often endure. How manipulation, control, and trauma can leave a person paralyzed and able to leave even when they want to, despite 4 police reports, despite 2 full case files submitted for prosecution, despite photographic evidence, despite eyewitness accounts. No restraining order was issued, no social worker was assigned, no safety plan was put in place. Carl wasn't ordered into counseling or anger management. Jill was never referred to a women's shelter to the system. It was just another domestic dispute, not a high-risk situation, not a potential tragedy in waiting. When it was too late, domestic violence advocacy groups spoke out. They condemned the police for failing to take decisive action. They asked the same question over and over. What if someone had listened? What if Carl had received counseling? What if Jill had been given the support she needed? The inquest was damning. It concluded that Carl Blue's violent behavior had been allowed to escalate unchecked, that the systems designed to protect Jill and her children had failed catastrophically. This wasn't just a case of domestic abuse. This was a systemic failure. Jill hadn't just fought her abuser. She'd fought the very institutions meant to protect her, and in the end they let her down. And so now, I ask you, what would you have done if you were in Jill's shoes? When the person hurting you wears a badge, when no one believes you, when the people you call for help do nothing, what then? It's not a simple question, but it's one we all need to sit with, because Jill's story isn't an isolated case. It's part of a pattern, and it's still happening, right now, to someone else.